Hello beautiful people, welcome to Mera Class. Today's topic: freedom struggle. In ancient times, people from all over the world were keen to come to India. The Persians, followed by the Iranians and Parsis, immigrated to India. Then came the Mughals, and they too settled down permanently in India. Chinggis Khan, the Mongolian, invaded and looted India many times. Alexander the Great too came to conquer India, but went back after a battle with Porus. Hiuen Tsang from China came in pursuit of knowledge, and to visit the ancient Indian universities of Nalanda and Takshila. Columbus wanted to come to India, but instead landed on the shores of America. Vasco da Gama from Portugal came to trade his country's goods in return for Indian spices. The French came and established their colonies in India. Lastly, the Britishers came and ruled over India for nearly 200 years. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757, the British achieved political power in India. And their paramountcy was established during the tenure of Lord Dalhousie, who became the Governor-General in 1848. He annexed Punjab, Peshawar, and the Pathan tribes in the northwest of India. And by 1856, the British conquest and its authority were firmly established. And while the British power gained its heights during the middle of the 19th century, the discontent of the local rulers, the peasantry, the intellectuals, common masses, as also of the soldiers who became unemployed due to the disbanding of the armies of various states that were annexed by the British, became widespread. This soon broke out into a revolt, which assumed the dimensions of the 1857 mutiny. You are watching Mera Class right now. The Indian Mutiny of 1857. The conquest of India, which could be said to have begun with the Battle of Plassey, 1757, was practically completed by the end of Dalhousie's tenure in 1856. It had been by no means a smooth affair, as the simmering discontent of the people manifested itself in many localized revolt during this period. However, the Mutiny of 1857, which began with a revolt of the military soldiers at Meerut, soon became widespread and posed a grave challenge to the British rule. Even though the British succeeded in crushing it within a year, it was certainly a popular revolt in which the Indian rulers, the masses, and the militia participated so enthusiastically that it came to be regarded as the first war of Indian independence. Introduction of zamindari system by the British, where the peasants were ruined through exorbitant charges made from them by the new class of landlords. The craftsmen were destroyed by the influx of the British manufactured goods. The religion and the caste system, which formed the firm foundation of the traditional Indian society, was endangered by the British administration. The Indian soldiers as well as people in administration could not rise in hierarchy, as the senior jobs were reserved for the Europeans. Thus, there was all-round discontent and disgust against the British rule, which burst out in a revolt by the sepoys at Meerut, whose religious sentiments were offended when they were given new cartridges greased with cow and pig fat, whose covering had to be stripped out by biting with the mouth before using them in rifles. The Hindu as well as the Muslim soldiers, who refused to use such cartridges, were arrested, which resulted in a revolt by their fellow soldiers on May 9, 1857. The rebel forces soon captured Delhi, and the revolt spread to a wider area, and there was uprising in almost all parts of the country. The most ferocious battles were fought in Delhi, Awadh, Rohilkhand, Bundelkhand, Allahabad, Agra, Meerut, and western Bihar. The rebellious forces under the commands of Kunwar Singh in Bihar and Bakht Khan in Delhi gave a stunning blow to the British. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib was proclaimed as the Peshwa, and the brave leader Tantia Tope led his troops. Rani Lakshmibai was proclaimed the ruler of Jhansi, who led her troops in the heroic battles with the British. The Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs and all the other brave sons of India fought shoulder to shoulder to throw out the British. The revolt was controlled by the British within 1 year. It began from Meerut on May 10, 1857, and ended in Gwalior on June 20, 1858. Motto of Mera Class: our guidance plus your hard work equals sure success. End of the East India Company. Consequent to the failure of the revolt of 1857 rebellion, one also saw the end of the East India Company's rule in India, and many important changes took place in the British government's policy towards India, which sought to strengthen the British rule through winning over the Indian princes, the chiefs, and the landlords. Queen Victoria's proclamation of November 1, 1858, declared that thereafter India would be governed by, and in the name of the British monarch, through a Secretary of State. Queen Victoria. The Governor-General was given title of Viceroy, which meant the representative of the monarch. Queen Victoria assumed the title of the Empress of India, and thus gave the British government unlimited powers to intervene in the internal affair of the Indian states. In brief, the British paramountcy over India, including the Indian states, was firmly established. The British gave their support to the loyal princes, zamindar, and local chiefs, but neglected the educated people and the common masses. They also promoted the other interests like those of the British merchants, industrialists, planters and civil servants. The people of India, as such, did not have any say in running the government or formulation of its policies. Consequently, people's disgust with the British rule kept mounting, which gave rise to the birth of Indian national movement. The leadership of the freedom movement passed into the hands of reformists like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Bankim Chandra, and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. During this time, the binding psychological concept of national unity was also forged in the fire of the struggle against a common foreign oppressor. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, 1772–1833. Founded the Brahmo Samaj in 1828, which aimed at purging the society of all its evil practices. He worked for eradicating evils like sati, child marriage and purdah system, championed widow marriage and women's education, and favored English system of education in India. It was through his effort that sati was declared a legal offence by the British. Swami Vivekananda, 1863–1902. The disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahansa, established the Ramakrishna Mission at Belur in 1897. He championed the supremacy of Vedantic philosophy. His talk at the Chicago, USA, Conference of World Religions in 1893 made the Westerners realize the greatness of Hinduism for the first time. Formation of Indian National Congress, Inc. The foundations of the Indian national movement were laid by Shudranath Banerjee, with the formation of Indian Association at Calcutta in 1876. The aim of the association was to represent the views of the educated middle class, inspire the Indian community to take the value of united action. The Indian Association was, in a way, the forerunner of the Indian National Congress, which was founded, with the help of A. O. Hume, a retired British official. The birth of Indian National Congress, Inc. in 1885 marked the entry of new educated middle class into politics and transformed the Indian political horizon. The first session of the Indian National Congress was held in Bombay in December 1885 under the presidentship of Wimish Chandra Banerjee, and was attended among others by N. Badruddin Tyabji. At the turn of the century, the freedom movement reached out to the common unlettered man through the launching of the Swadeshi movement by leaders such as Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Aurobindo Ghosh. The Congress session at Calcutta in 1906, presided by Dadabhai Naoroji, gave a call for attainment of Swaraj, a type of self-government elected by the people within the British Dominion, as it prevailed in Canada and Australia, which were also the parts of the British Empire. Meanwhile, in 1909, the British government announced certain reforms in the structure of government in India, which are known as Morley-Minto reforms. But these reforms came as a disappointment, as they did not mark any advance towards the establishment of a representative government. The provision of special representation of the Muslim was seen as a threat to the Hindu-Muslim unity, on which the strength of the national movement rested. So, these reforms were vehemently opposed by all the leaders, including the Muslim leader Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Subsequently, King George V made two announcements in Delhi. Firstly, the partition of Bengal, which had been effected in 1905, was annulled and, secondly, it was announced that the capital of India was to be shifted from Calcutta to Delhi. The disgust with the reforms announced in 1909 led to the intensification of the struggle for Swaraj. While, on one side, the activists led by the great leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai and Bipin Chandra Pal waged a virtual war against the British, on the other side, the revolutionaries stepped up their violent activities. There was a widespread unrest in the country. To add to the already growing discontent among the people, Rowlatt Act was passed in 1919, which empowered the government to put people in jail without trial. This caused widespread indignation, led to massive demonstration and hartals, which the government repressed with brutal measures like the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, where thousands of unarmed peaceful people were gunned down on the order of General Dyer. Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Jallianwala Bagh massacre of April 13, 1919, was one of the most inhuman acts of the British rulers in India. The people of Punjab gathered on the auspicious day of Baisakhi at Jallianwala Bagh, adjacent to Golden Temple, Amritsar, to lodge their protest peacefully against persecution by the British Indian government. General Dyer appeared suddenly with his armed police force and fired indiscriminately at innocent, empty-handed people, leaving hundreds of people dead, including women and children. After the First World War, 1914 to 1918, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi became the undisputed leader of the Congress. During this struggle, Mahatma Gandhi had developed the novel technique of non-violent agitation, which he called satyagraha, loosely translated as moral domination. Gandhi, himself a devout Hindu, also espoused a total moral philosophy of tolerance, brotherhood of all religions, non-violence, ahimsa, and of simple living. With this, new leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose also emerged on the scene and advocated the adoption of complete independence as the goal of the national movement. The Non-Cooperation Movement. The Non-Cooperation Movement was pitched in under leadership of Mahatma Gandhi and the Indian National Congress from September 1920 to February 1922, marking a new awakening in the Indian independence movement. After a series of events including the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, Gandhiji realized that there was no prospect of getting any fair treatment at the hands of British, so he planned to withdraw the nation's cooperation from the British government, thus launching the non-cooperation movement, and thereby marring the administrative setup of the country. This movement was a great success as it got massive encouragement to millions of Indians. This movement almost shook the British authorities. Simon Commission. The non-cooperation movement failed. Therefore there was a lull in political activities. The Simon Commission was sent to India in 1927 by the British government to suggest further reforms in the structure of Indian government. The commission did not include any Indian member, and the government showed no intention of accepting the demand for Swaraj. Therefore, it sparked a wave of protests all over the country, and the Congress, as well as the Muslim League, gave a call to boycott it under the leadership of Lala Lajpat Rai. The crowds were lathi-charged and Lala Lajpat Rai, also called Sheri Punjab, Lion of Punjab, died of the blows received in an agitation. Civil Disobedience Movement. Mahatma Gandhi led the civil disobedience movement that was launched in the Congress session of December 1929. The aim of this movement was a complete disobedience of the orders of the British government. During this movement it was decided that India would celebrate January 26 as Independence Day all over the country. On January 26, 1930, meetings were held all over the country, and the Congress tricolour was hoisted. The British government tried to repress the movement and resorted to brutal firing, killing hundreds of people. Thousands were arrested along with Gandhiji and Jawaharlal Nehru. But the movement spread to all the four corners of the country. Following this, roundtable conferences were arranged by the British, and Gandhiji attended the second roundtable conference at London. But nothing came out of the conference, and the civil disobedience movement was revived. During this time, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru, were arrested on the charges of throwing a bomb in the Central Assembly Hall, which is now Lok Sabha, in Delhi, to demonstrate against the autocratic alien rule. They were hanged to death on March 23, 1931. Please subscribe Mera Class. The Non-Cooperation Movement. The non-cooperation movement was pitched in under leadership of Mahatma Gandhi and the Indian National Congress from September 1920 to February 1922, marking a new awakening in the Indian independence movement. After a series of events including the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, Gandhiji realized that there was no prospect of getting any fair treatment at the hands of British, so he planned to withdraw the nation's cooperation from the British government, thus launching the non-cooperation movement, and thereby marring the administrative setup of the country. This movement was a great success as it got massive encouragement to millions of Indians. This movement almost shook the British authorities. Simon Commission. The non-cooperation movement failed. Therefore there was a lull in political activities. The Simon Commission was sent to India in 1927 by the British government to suggest further reforms in the structure of Indian government. The commission did not include any Indian member, and the government showed no intention of accepting the demand for Swaraj. Therefore, it sparked a wave of protests all over the country, and the Congress, as well as the Muslim League, gave a call to boycott it under the leadership of Lala Lajpat Rai. The crowds were lathi-charged and Lala Lajpat Rai, also called Sheri Punjab, Lion of Punjab, died of the blows received in an agitation. Civil disobedience movement. Mahatma Gandhi led the civil disobedience movement that was launched in the Congress session of December 1929. The aim of this movement was a complete disobedience of the orders of the British government. During this movement it was decided that India would celebrate January 26 as Independence Day all over the country. On January 26, 1930, meetings were held all over the country, and the Congress tricolour was hoisted. The British government tried to repress the movement and resorted to brutal firing, killing hundreds of people. Thousands were arrested along with Gandhiji and Jawaharlal Nehru. But the movement spread to all the four corners of the country. Following this, roundtable conferences were arranged by the British, and Gandhiji attended the second roundtable conference at London. But nothing came out of the conference, and the civil disobedience movement was revived. During this time, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru were arrested on the charges of throwing a bomb in the Central Assembly Hall, which is now Lok Sabha, in Delhi, to demonstrate against the autocratic alien rule. They were hanged to death on March 23, 1931. Mera Class. 100% free class for all students. So that please support. Quit India movement. In August 1942, Gandhiji started the Quit India movement and decided to launch a mass civil disobedience movement do or die call to force the British to leave India. The movement was followed, nonetheless, by large-scale violence directed at railway stations, telegraph offices, government buildings, and other emblems and institutions of colonial rule. There were widespread acts of sabotage, and the government held Gandhi responsible for these acts of violence, suggesting that they were a deliberate act of Congress policy. However, all the prominent leaders were arrested, the Congress was banned, and the police and army were brought out to suppress the movement. Meanwhile, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, who stealthily ran away from the British detention in Calcutta, reached foreign lands and organized the Indian National Army, INA, to overthrow the British from India. The Second World War broke out in September of 1939, and without consulting the Indian leaders, India was declared a warring state, on behalf of the British, by the Governor-General. Subhash Chandra Bose, with the help of Japan, preceded fighting the British forces, and not only freed Andaman and Nicobar Islands from the Britishers, but also entered the northeastern border of India. But in 1945 Japan was defeated, and Netaji proceeded from Japan through an aeroplane to a place of safety, but met with an accident, and it was given out that he died in that air crash itself. "Give me blood and I shall give you freedom" was one of the most popular statements made by him, where he urges the people of India to join him in his freedom movement. Partition of India and Pakistan. At the conclusion of the Second World War, the Labour Party, under Prime Minister Clement Richard Attlee, came to power in Britain. The Labour Party was largely sympathetic towards Indian people for freedom. A cabinet mission was sent to India in March 1946, which after a careful study of the Indian political scenario, proposed the formation of an interim government and convening of a constituent assembly comprising members elected by the provincial legislatures and nominees of the Indian states. An interim government was formed headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. However, the Muslim League refused to participate in the deliberations of the Constituent Assembly and pressed for the separate state for Pakistan. Lord Mountbatten, the Viceroy of India, presented a plan for the division of India into India and Pakistan, and the Indian leaders had no choice but to accept the division, as the Muslim League was adamant. Thus, India became free at the stroke of midnight, on August 14, 1947. Since then, every year India celebrates its Independence Day on August 15. Jawaharlal Nehru became the first Prime Minister of Free India, and continued his term till 1964. Giving voice to the sentiments of the nation, Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said, "Long years ago we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we will redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance. We end today a period of ill fortune, and India discovers herself again." Earlier, a Constituent Assembly was formed in July 1946 to frame the Constitution of India, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected its president. The Constitution of India, which was adopted by the Constituent Assembly on November 26, 1949. On January 26, 1950, the Constitution came into force and Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected the first President of India. Thanks of watching. For more video, please hit the bell icon. Suggest topics and comment. Share too.